Hey guys, Kevin for Colony Season 1, Episode 8, In From the Cold, and holy shit, guys, this episode was amazing. By far best episode of the season. This episode, much unlike the last episode, which was good for a lot of it, there were a lot of times in that episode where it was very slow and there wasn't a whole lot going on. There were things going on, but it just wasn't as interesting. This episode was so quick. Like, there were so many things that happened. There were so many revelations in this episode, which I really love. And especially because we have 2 episodes left this season, it's going to get crazy. And like I said, by far best episode of the season. And this episode was definitely a long time coming. Like, you could definitely tell we were going to get to this point eventually. But I didn't think we'd get to in episode 8. But let's just get into it because I'm very happy we got to what we did here. And the way this episode starts, I really do love because we finally get to see the factory in this episode. Now, we did see some of the factory before episode 2, that sequence, if you remember, with Carlos, where they were going to take a shower and, where they were going to get gas, where it seemed like they were going to get gas, but they didn't die, that whole thing. We did see something like that, but here we get to see exactly what the factory is. And it's pretty much what I thought it was. It's pretty much like a concentration camp. I mean, you work, you eat, and you sleep. And now the difference is that you do eat and sleep, which of course in concentration camps they didn't feed you, they didn't really care about sleep and things like that. There were times to sleep, but it was constant working. And this is pretty much you work, you sleep, you eat. That's your life. And there's no getting sick because if you fail to be of use, you die. And that's also very interesting. And it's a crazy scene. I mean, the scene where the guy is just like coughing and then the guys come in and just take him. It was a really hard scene to watch, I gotta say, and they really did that very well. Like, I think they really showed how, dreadful this life can be. I mean, we've heard terrible things about the factory and how bad it is and things like that, but I never expected it to be this bad. I mean, this guy was just coughing, choking. I don't even think that he was dying, and, the guy was like, I'm okay, and they just straight up, killed him. It was crazy. And another fact is that the factory is located in space, close enough to Earth to see it, but impossible to reach. So now we know why if you go to the factory, you don't come back, because it's impossible to reach, and it's pretty crazy, I gotta say, the factory, but that's the world, and I'm glad that we found out what the factory was. Now there's no more mystery, now it's not, frustrating that I have to, try to figure out what the factory is, and now we know, and I'm very happy about that. So, awesome sequence. I mean, very hard to watch, but definitely a really great sequence. And then the momentum in this episode just continues because then we get another amazing scene of Will and, Katie. Basically, Will decides that it's time, that now he needs to tell Bram and Gracie that Charlie's alive and well. And if you remember, a few episodes back, I mean, Will even said, hey, don't tell Gracie what's going on. There was that whole scene, if you remember, with Katie, telling Gracie something that wasn't true, and you could tell that Bram was getting suspicious. And in this episode, that suspicion ends. Gracie wants to know if her brother's coming home. Will tells her that's the plan, and that the whole reason he went to work was for the government. And as he says this, he throws a sidelong glance at Katie, who does her best to pretend not to notice. Bram is also very frustrated that his father can't offer up more information because we know that Bram has wanted all this information. That he's a very suspicious kid. He wants answers, and it's understandable. But Will insists that he's making progress. Bram storms out saying he'll be home late, but refuses to offer up any explanation. And Katie isn't happy, obviously, that Will decided to break the news without discussing it. He literally just did it without her thinking about it. But Will says that there was nothing to discuss, there should be no secrets in this house, and the entire episode, you can tell that he's on to Katie. I mean, he knows that Katie is, working with the Resistance, and he's really upset about that. And Katie knows that as well. But of course, she's going to keep up the charade and play dumb for as long as she can. Which I can understand if some people are upset that she did that, but it really does go with her character. I mean, we know the reasons why she doesn't want to tell Will, because obviously she doesn't want to ruin their marriage, things like that. It could end up really bad for them, and she's going to try to play dumb, but she really can't. I mean, you can tell that Will knows, what she's really doing, and I really think they handled that really well. The scenes between Katie and Will are really, they feel really distant and very apart, and it really works. I mean, honestly, that's how it should be, and I thought they handled that really well. So Snyder gets a surprise visit from Helena, and I like this because it again shows that Snyder is not above this, Helena. Helena is above him, and that he has this boss, and I think they do a good job with this. She informs him the chief minister of the Pacific Coast is coming to the colony for the anniversary of the arrival, and Snyder questions if there's going to be some type of celebration, but Helena says the visit's more of a performance review, and Snyder tells Katie he thinks things are going well. They're meeting their worker quotas, and since the execution of Geronimo, there's been no major insurrection. So basically, Helena reminds him of his abduction attempt, but Snyder dismisses this and assures her the situation is being completely handled by his counterinsurgency team. It's not Helena who needs convincing. Helena has her doubts about Snyder's leadership style. While she wants to maintain order through fear, Snyder believes the same goal can be achieved by giving people a different quality of life. Helena isn't going to waste time arguing over their different ideologies. Snyder will be given the chance to discuss his policies with Chief Minister himself, but she does warn Snyder that nobody else is doing it his way. So it's kind of this eccentric style that isn't necessary, that no one else is really doing. And she's not upset, but no one's really, following him. So Katie then arranged to meet with Rachel, and I like this scene because I thought that Katie was going to be against Rachel and be betrayed by her, but it seems like you really see how similar these two women are. Rachel brings her sons along. Katie's surprised they don't know what their mother's up to, and Katie can't include Gracie, who's too young, and she doesn't want to put that burden on Bram, especially since Will doesn't know. Well, to her, at least, he doesn't know. You can tell that he definitely does know, but she, is again, doesn't really, knows that he knows, but of course, he doesn't really know. So Katie tells Rachel she wants out. If Broussard had followed through with Quayle's orders, her children would be without a mother, and she can't have that. Half the cell's dead or gone. Broussard's cover is blown, and Katie questions if it was worth the price they paid. And Rachel promises Katie that she'll go to Quayle and tell him that Katie served her time and that he needs to leave Katie and her family alone, or she's out too, which I think it would make sense. I mean, I can understand why Katie wants out. Her husband is getting suspicious. She can tell that he definitely is not trusting her. Got Broussard, who she doesn't really know if she trusts, and Quayle as well. It's just better for everyone probably if she just gets out, because there really are many more there, and we know she's been questioning this lifestyle ever since she really sees how this war is starting, and she doesn't want to be a part of it, so she basically wants out. And I really like the way this was done. Like I said, every scene in this episode pretty much is getting us somewhere. There's no dull scenes here, which I really loved. So at the office, Will receives a phone call. It's Quayle, who, if you remember, Will did have that brief encounter with in the last episode, but we get a lot more with Quayle and Will. He doesn't identify himself, but outs Katie as the leak, and he gives Will instructions on where to meet, and this obviously changes everything. Will gets on a city bus, takes a seat by Quayle, who he recognized from the raid at Broussard's house, and Will wants to know how he knows his wife, and Quayle admits that he runs her cell, and Will now knows everything, which I was very happy about. And I can understand why some people are upset. Maybe this wasn't as big, but Will is always kind of known. Like, you could tell in this episode, Will already knew. He just didn't know this one part of her being the leak, and obviously he's really upset. And you can tell this is a lot of information for Will to take in, but he kind of just has to just sit back and be like, all right, I understand the way this is going to go. So Quayle wants to make a deal, and the deal that he makes is very interesting. He's going to turn over on his cell minus Katie. In exchange, he'll be allowed to go outside the walls with a truck fully stocked with provisions, and Will questions what's outside the wall, and Quayle says that there are a pocket of survivors who the Raps leave alone, and he gives Will his number, tells him to call when he's ready to deal, and basically it seems like they're going to work together, which is really interesting. So Broussard, who's still underground, meets with a member of another cell. The man wants to enlist Broussard to help his group. He knows there's a VIP coming to the block. He also knows one in mode of transit. He hands Broussard a manila envelope, calling it a business plan, assures Broussard that they've done their due diligence. Broussard walks off without giving the guy an answer, which was very interesting. The fact that he didn't give him an answer, I mean, interesting stuff there. So Will confides in Bo that he might be the source of the leak, and he lets Bo know that the guy claiming to be the head of Broussard's cell wants to cut a deal. And basically, Bo senses Will's worried about who Quayle might bring with him, and Bo wonders what would happen if Broussard were to happen to find out someone who was trying to sell him out. Will hypothesizes the cell might clean up their own messes, and basically Will takes the deal to Snyder, who's willing to work out an arrangement, but he does want to meet with the guy face to face because he doesn't really know this guy's agenda. He doesn't know if he's legit, so he obviously is kind of suspicious, and Will doesn't think it's a good idea for obvious reasons. But we know why he doesn't think it's a good idea because he now knows his wife was working there, and plus they were against them. But Snyder doesn't care. I mean, at this point, he's got a pending review, and he can't afford really any more disasters. And if this guy's willing to make a partnership, that's better in the long run because there's no attacks, there's no war that really needs to be started. And I like the way that this was done. I mean, Quail, it seemed like, was going to be this, huge villain, but he wants to make this deal all of a sudden, which is interesting. So Broussard and Quail are still in contact. Broussard wants to know how the Red Hats found him and refuses to believe it's Katie. He also confronts Broussard about his claims of knowing Geronimo, and Quail dismisses as a white lie to appease the mob, and he was certain Broussard knew it was bullshit. So basically, he's going along with this idea that it was a white lie. Broussard wants to know what's next. Quail says that it's business as usual, fight until they're gone. Broussard shows him the intel from the other cell and explains the plan is solid. All they need is some tactical expertise to pull it off. So you can tell this deal is not true. Like, Quail really doesn't want this deal. He's still against, he's highly against the Raps, and that's very interesting to see. So Will comes home, decides to use Katie to bait the hook, and he tells her all about his big break at work. And you can tell this whole scene, he's trying to get her to admit what she's doing. The head of Broussard's cell wants to make a deal. He's spooked and willing to give Broussard to save his own ass. Katie leaves to work a shift at the Yonk, but makes a stop along the way. She calls and leaves a coded message for Broussard, basically warning him about what is getting ready to go down. And he already knows what's going down. Like, he doesn't really need this call, but of course, he accepts it and listens to what she has to say. But what's interesting is that Will never really calls out Katie in this episode. Now, why do I think he didn't confront Katie about this? Because he wants her to tell him himself. I mean, I think obviously he knows it's true, but at the same time, I don't think he just think that Quail would just randomly point out his wife and try to threaten him or something like that. But he wants to hear from Katie because obviously he wants trust. One of the most important things in a marriage or any relationship is trust. And Katie's not really giving him that trust, and he wants that. And it's very interesting to see. I really like the way they're handling that, I gotta say. And I know it's gonna come out at some point, and that's gonna be crazy. But right now, she has not admitted, that she's working with the Resistance because she's not anymore. That's kind of her way out of this. So Bram is also working on a covert op. If you remember, he managed to get his teacher, Mr. Carson, the lens for his telescope during one of his scavenging missions, but it's not good enough. They need professional gear, an infrared or radio telescope, and they are able to see enough to discern some changes on the moon, and Carson believes that the hosts have set up a base there, and that's why they never see them. But it's all conjecture until they can get a better look. Now, of course, they don't know, what's going on with the factory and things like that, so they're still trying to get information, and I like that Bram is kind of doing this with his teacher. I think it's good to see. I definitely do enjoy that. And you can tell that he really doesn't trust his parents right now, which is very interesting. So Katie takes out the garbage. Broussard's waiting in the shadows for a man. He gets around, and basically we see he's waiting in the shadows, and she tells him that Quail sold them out, and that Will told her that he's trying to cut a deal with the occupation, and Broussard doesn't buy it. He suggests that Will could be feeding Katie false information in an attempt to manipulate her, and he's part right anyway, which is true. That's what he's doing. I mean, he's basically trying to give her this, the false information part's not true, but he is manipulating her. Like, he's basically doing this to just get her to admit, alright, this is what I'm doing. Because I'm pretty sure once she admits this, Will's probably just going to cut this deal, because obviously it doesn't really do him much. And in spite of knowing that Broussard took out the other cell, and the fact that he flirted with the idea of executing her, Katie still called to warn him that the Red Hats were coming. Why? Because he's the reason she joined the Resistance in the first place. Never mind, she's the one who sold him out to the occupation in the first place, sending him to his front door. So Broussard has no illusions about Quail, but he doesn't have him pegged as a sellout, and Quail saved his ass multiple times when it would have been easier to walk away, and Katie knows that they have a history, but she needs Broussard to believe that this threat is real, and he thanks her for the heads up and walks off. So Broussard and Quail find time to have another meeting in a dark and shadowy locale, and Broussard wants to know if Quail is talking to the occupation, as if Quail would admit it, and it's very similar to what Will is trying to do with Katie, which I really like. I mean, the relation between Broussard and Katie and Quail is very much like the one between Will and Katie, in the sense that Quail is doing a lot of things that Broussard doesn't know about. Like, Broussard has an idea what Quail is doing, but he's not really being honest, and he, of course, tries to discredit Katie, says that Katie has no idea what she's talking about, and Broussard tells Quayle that Katie was the one who tipped him off to that Red Hats, but Quayle points out that maybe she did so because she was the one who tipped them off. And Broussard still wants an answer to his question, and he says no, and what likely is an attempt to steer Broussard off course. And Quayle says he reviewed the details of the other cell's planning and wants to meet with them, and Broussard agrees to set it up, but Quayle says that if they're going to move forward, Broussard has to cut off all contact with Katie, and Broussard agrees. And literally, he said, look, I just want you to just cut Katie entirely, which is crazy. I mean, we know the relationship that these two have. And I think Broussard agreed to it because he wants answers. He doesn't want to hear this bullshit from Quayle, and he knows the Quayle is lying to him. So Bram has come up with a plan to help him and Carson get a better look at what's going on in the sky. He did some research, and there's all sorts of specialized equipment at USC and up on Mount Wilson, and Bram thinks that there's a good chance that the Raps didn't destroy it because it's located outside the zone, and Carson reminds Bram that they are locked in, but Bram insinuates that that's not necessarily the case. It looks like he and Carson will be making a trip down the rabbit hole together, which that's going to be interesting to see, definitely, if they're going to be successful with that, because we know what happened the last time someone tried to do that. The Red Hats could get them. I mean, there are a lot of possibilities as to what could happen here. So I don't see things really going well for Bram and Carson, unfortunately. And of course, they don't really know. They know what could happen to them, but they don't really care. They just want answers, and they're going to do whatever they can to get them, which is interesting. So Will then takes Snyder to see Quayle because, of course, Snyder wanted a face-to-face meeting with him, and Snyder questions why he should trust a man willing to stab his own friends in the back, and I think that, Snyder asks him some really reasonable questions here. Quayle responds because he's a pessimist when it comes to the future of the block. He has no desire to live under the thumb of Snyder, his compatriots, or the Raps, and he wants a transit pass code to let him through whatever he wants. In exchange, he'll let him set up Broussard, and Snyder agrees to the deal, and he offers Will and Snyder one last piece of advice when going after Broussard: don't miss. So basically, that's what they're planning on doing. They're going to go after Broussard, and the clandestine the meets up continues. This time it's Quayle hooking up with Broussard and the guy from the other cell, and they picked up a bustling outdoor location. Quayle's being watched not only by Will and his team, but Katie as well, and you can tell that everyone's really suspicious of Quayle because Quayle had this huge agenda that no one really knew about. She spots a Red Hat, realizes this is all a setup. Broussard's wearing an earpiece. She's able to warn him. Katie sets off some firecrackers as a distraction, and everyone scatters, including Rachel, who gets shot and killed by Red Hats, which, I mean, it's really sad to think about. Just knowing that Rachel has kids and is kind of like Katie in that sense and was trying to get out. I mean, it's crazy because knowing this could happen to Rachel, imagine what could happen to Katie. I really don't see things going well from here on out. So Broussard escapes, which sends Snyder into a snit, but all hope is not lost. Jennifer has some good news. She has managed to identify Quayle as the informant, and he used to be a CI station chief in Berlin. He was forced into early retirement when something went wrong on the mission, and Snyder surmises Quayle is obviously not some low-level operative and orders they get Quayle into interrogation, because there's a lot of things that he's not telling them about, and obviously they want to hear from him. So Bill and Will go to where Quayle is being held, determined that Snyder not get his hands on him. Will tells him the deal's canceled, wants to know if Quayle can disappear with the block, and Quayle assures him he could hide in Will's house for 6 months and he'll never be the wiser. Quayle comes up with a plan that has him disappearing, never to be heard from again, and all Will has to do is let him escape. And Will wants to know why Quayle recruited Katie, but he tells Will that Broussard did, and Quayle praises Katie, calling her an honorable woman with rebellion in her bones. She truly believed that she could make a difference. I mean, that's the reason that she joined, which is true, but it's also not, because we know the big reason was to protect her family. That's really what she wanted to do, so that way she could protect her family, and that was the only way. But I think Katie did truly think she could make a difference, and she knew she couldn't once she actually saw what the resistance does. And Will questions how Broussard got to her, but all Quayle will say is that both he and Broussard saw great potential in her, and he's not answering the actual question. The art deception is natural talent, and Katie has it in spades. And Will knows after this, of course, that he can't trust Quayle, and obviously there are reasons why. And I expect he also thinks the guy is a major asshole, so he shoots this man in the chest as well as the two Red Hats guarding him, which was crazy. I mean, he just shot him, and understandable. I mean, Quail 1 is being kind of an asshole. He really is. I mean, he's not giving them the answer they want, and he's being very shady, so it makes sense why he shot him. So Bo enters the building, and after assessing the situation, wants to know what they do now. What they do is lie, and Bo tells Snyder that Quail and his guards were dead when he and Will got there. Will says it must have been Broussard, but Snyder doesn't understand how he could have known where they were hiding. Quail, and Snyder senses that something's amiss and demands to know the truth, or all the goodwill Will built with him and favors he thinks he's are owed are gone. And Snyder's done being nice. He warns Bo and Will that if this backhanded shit continues, they will both go to the factory. And I mean, he has reasons to threaten them, and Bo's turning out to not only be a good partner, but actually be a really good friend. The way that he is actually sticking by Will, I really do enjoy. I mean, many people aren't sticking by Will, and you can tell that Bo is, and I can understand why Snyder is upset. I mean, his job is on the line, and of course, Will, I think, knows that, but, to Will, Snyder is his boss, and that's kind of how it goes, which is interesting. So, a crowd then gathers outside some city building. Rachel and her son's bodies are hanging there as a reminder and a warning, and it's a really hard scene to watch. I mean, not as hard as the factory scene, I think, is still the hardest scene to watch in this episode, but this was still really crazy. I mean, just knowing who Rachel was and knowing who she was to Katie, and again, when you see Katie and think of who she is and her kids and things like that, knowing this can just happen, I mean, it's crazy, and of course, it's a warning of what could happen, and I really think it's showing the impending doom that's definitely coming. So Broussard slides up next to Katie, explains he's radioactive and has to go off the grid for a while, but it isn't over yet. An opportunity will come again, and when it does, he wants her with him, and that's how the episode ends. So overall, guys, game-changing stuff. I mean, this really was a game-changing episode. You now have Quail, who is gone and, is not working with the Resistance anymore. You have Katie, who wanted out, but now she can't get out because, Broussard is leaving, and she pretty much has to step up, and I'm pretty sure she's going to, but I think she also wants to lay low because she knows that Will's suspicious, and Will is trying to get her to admit the truth, and she's not going to, and basically she doesn't really know what to do, and I can totally understand that. Things you can tell are very complicated right now between Will and Katie, and I don't really know what's going to happen there. I don't sense good stuff for them, though. I mean, Katie needs to admit to Will what she's doing because he clearly can tell what she's doing. She just needs to admit. And obviously, he's not going to be surprised, but she just needs to admit, this is what I'm doing, this is why I did it, and then he'll probably understand. But the way we're going, it seems like Katie's not even allying with Will. Like, she's working with Broussard, which is very interesting that he said that. And Broussard kind of wants her to work against Will, which I can understand. Her and Will kind of do want different things. I mean, she's now very tight with the Resistance, and she's formed this bond with them, while Will's against them. And I think Will kind of is understanding them. He was willing to work with Quail, but now he's completely against them, and he's going after Broussard, which is crazy to see, and we'll have to see what happens with that. But Snyder, I can understand why he's really upset with Will. I mean, he's not doing exactly what Snyder told him to do, and, Snyder, was really upset with what happened with Quail and everything. I can totally understand that. His job is on the line. Really bad things could happen to Snyder, definitely, so I can totally understand why he's upset with, Will, that definitely does make sense to me. But I do like this bonding between Bo and Will. I think they're handling that really well. Just the bonding between those two, they work really well together. Broussard's living off the grid right now. Where's he gonna go? We'll have to see what happens there. It's gonna be very interesting with that. Like I said, Rachel's death, very sad to see her go. I mean, she was a really good character, and I'm sad to see her go. And I really do sense the worst for Katie. I really do. I mean, knowing what could happen with Rachel, I really do sense something very bad is going to happen to Katie. And I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but like I said, I really do sense the worst for her. And then Bram. Bram, as we know, is trying to now get intel. He's trying to get as much information as possible. And I hope this works for him. I'm really worried about Bram and Mr. Carson because we know what happens when you try to go through the rabbit hole. There are red hats, but knowing that Broussard's off the grid, I mean, are there going to be as many red hats? We'll have to see. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be red hats patrolling the streets. That's just how the world is, but definitely very interesting to see what's going on there. I don't think they're going to make it out, though. I really think that something bad is going to happen to them. I mean, just knowing what happened to that one boy that claimed to be Geronimo, if you remember, I really don't know what's going to happen with Bram. We'll have to see what happens. Maybe Paya's going to have to help him. I really do feel that Paya's got to get involved at some point because we know that whole thing where Bram finally saw where Paya lives and things like that. So that has to happen at some point. I mean, you can't just show Paya and not have her involved with what's going on. There just has to be some sort of a connection there. I don't know. I just feel like there's some sort of connection there. We'll have to see what that is. Definitely, that's gonna be very interesting. And then I like that Will did tell Bram and Gracie what's going on. I mean, Bram now knows and Gracie knows. Katie said that she's not gonna bring her kids with her, but is she gonna tell them more what's going on? I mean, the direction it seems, like I said, it really does seem like Katie is doing something completely against Will. Like, this really has nothing to do with what Will is doing, and that's very interesting to see. And I also really like seeing the factory in this episode. Just everything about this episode, I really thought worked really, really well. Like I said, by far best episode of the season. I really did love this episode, and I really do feel it's only getting better from here. I mean, it really is getting crazy. We'll have to see what happens in these last two episodes, but let me know what you guys saw this episode. Absolutely love this episode. Amazing stuff overall, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for the Vampire Diaries, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.